But to start talking about risk and to get to the morals of the story, so to speak, we have to start with a model. Now, I'm going to, at the risk of sounding slightly philosophical, I'm going to back off from risk for a second and talk about models. So, you are a first-time visitor to New York, correct? And you've only been here for a year. So you still get confused by the streets crossing one another in the West Village where, 4th and 11th and so on cross one another, right? Okay. How do you, when you need to go to some place that you're not particularly familiar with, how do you do it? Uber. So Uber, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, if you're sort of more of a do-it-yourselfer, is to haul out the phone and look at a map.
I did that last night.
That's what you, okay, all right? How do I get to Bank Street from here, for example, right? Okay. Well, a map is a model. A map is a model. The street map you use to walk around New York City is a model of New York City. It looks nothing like New York City. New York City is not two-dimensional. New York City is three-dimensional. It has bumpy bits called buildings. All right? It's rough when you run your hand over it. It's not smooth like the map. Okay? So the model, in some sense, is patently false. It's wrong. But that doesn't make it useless. All right? It is, in fact, useful. Right? What models do is they allow us to abstract from a lot of unnecessary clutter in order to try to understand the moral or the implications of one or two or more principles. So whenever you build a model, what you're doing is you're thinking in the abstract. In other words, you're saying, imagine a world which is simpler than the one I live in, get rid of the bumpy bits, represent the city by a little yellow blotch surrounded by some blue called rivers, and put little white lines down on the yellow blotch and call those things the streets. All right. So that's thinking in the abstract. So I would go a little further. That's thinking, period. All the thinking you ever do is in the abstract. There is no such thing as thinking without a model. That's what it's a characteristic of being a human being, is that we build models all the time. So why am I going on this tirade? The reason is I want to convince you that if you're going to make any headway in almost any endeavor, i.e. you want to think, you need to build a model. And the risk management, the discipline, if you like, is replete with models. Models everywhere. But all of these models are kind of hokey. I'm going to admit that up front. And the reason why they're kind of hokey is because they're ad hoc. They're not based on some kind of grand general theory, if you like, of how the world works. Right? What I call the standard model, and of course I stole that expression from the physicists. So the reason why the risk models are hokey is because in the standard model of economics and finance, there is no room for risk. Let me rephrase that. I shouldn't say there's no room for risk. There's no room for risk management. Okay? In the standard model, we have what we call perfect capital markets. So the proponents of this idea, the original proponents, you can argue, whenever you talk about what people have done in the past, you always run the risk that you've missed some guy who sat in his basement and was doing the same thing but never published anything and got there first and so on. But it's conventional wisdom is that these two fellows, Franco Modigliani and Merton Miller, were the first people to come up with this notion, to write down this model. And it reads like pure fantasy. Imagine a world with no transaction costs. What that means is there's no bid-offer spreads. So the price at which you can buy and the price at which you can sell, whether it be a treasury bond or your house or your car, battered up, used, 10 years old like mine, there's no bid offer, all right? No taxes, wishful thinking, right? No indivisible assets. I can sell assets in arbitrary quantities, borrowing and lending at the same rate of interest, so you, me, and the Fed borrow and lend at the same rate, all right? Unlimited short sales of assets, right? I can short the universe, no problem, all right? No informational asymmetries. Everyone knows exactly the same about everything. I know exactly what is in every TBA mortgage pool. And I know just as well as the originators of those mortgages what's in those pools. I know the credit quality of the individual borrowers. I know exactly how beaten up the neighborhood is when I see a zip code on a particular mortgage, etc., right? And financial agents are price takers. In addition to all of that, there's nothing I can do which will affect the market clearing price for anything. Now, you say, okay, well, let's skip that and get on to the reality. But this is how you start. You start building, you start from, we're starting to draw a map of Manhattan. Okay, so this is how you start. The implications of this is that the capital structure of the firm has no bearing on its value. This is known as the debt equity irrelevance proposition. You may have heard of that before if you remember when you were in college, if you took a finance class. Firm's dividend policy has no bearing on its value. Doesn't matter whether you pay dividends or retain earnings. Doesn't affect the value of the firm. In other words, the stockholders and the bondholders see right through that. They just see that as a ploy, what we call financial engineering. All right? There's no room for risk management, and I'm going to make that clear in a second. Costless risk management does not change the firm value. You can't make firms worth more. And costly risk management may reduce firm value. In other words, if anything, what the standard model is telling you is that risk management is a bad idea.